Can you um, can you share with us the structural shifts that you are seeing now in this industry? As a few months ago, people were very concerned about shutting down permanently and how they will reopen. There was the Gym Act that you actively supported with lots of other big names in this industry to help those businesses that had a 33% chance of not reopening and not making it through the year without direct aid and funding. But now that businesses are reopening, now that in different areas, some companies are seeing numbers like they saw in 2019, what are the structural shifts you are seeing in this industry for salons, for spas, and for gyms?
Yeah, so there's been several shifts. The first is that, as you mentioned earlier, roughly 20% of businesses have closed their doors, perhaps permanently, and we won't know that for probably another year until we look at the data and see who closed temporarily and then reopened or were shut permanently. And what we saw is that disproportionately affected the small and medium businesses. So larger businesses that had material revenues, or that were part of a corporate owned brand, or that were part of a franchise, had a better chance at being able to survive the pandemic and open up on the other side. Some of it goes to the topics you mentioned about, how do you apply for PPP? How do you renegotiate with your landlord? The franchisors were pumping out this information during the midst of COVID to help their franchisees, whereas the smaller mom and pop didn't have that information. We published and offered a lot of feedback on everything from how to manage your staff, how to retain your customers, what to do with your lease, how to think about pricing your products. And so we acted as that franchisor for the businesses that didn't have that. But that said, we still saw the businesses that were smaller and lower on the revenue side pre-pandemic, they just had a higher failure rate. So that was number one. Number two was, and this was more specific to the fitness industry, but what was interesting is that as locations and storefronts closed, whether temporarily or permanently, a lot of the individual instructors that were there said, hey, I've got to go out and figure out how to make a living, and I'm passionate about wellness. So I'm now going to go, stand up my own business, and it's going to be largely virtual, or it might be in person at a park, or I might come to your house. And so this, what we call kind of a solopreneur, some people call them fitness creators. And so these are folks that, went out and took what they had learned and been doing in a studio and shifted to be able to do that on their own. And frankly, in most cases are making quite a bit more money than what they were able to earn before. And so I think that that's also a permanent structural shift.
The last point that I'll touch on is to highly encourage people to tune into the Global Wellness Summit that will be taking place early December in Boston, and to tune in either in person, because I believe that early November there will be no more restrictions there will be no travel ban to go to the US. There was such a thing as a national interest exemption to only go to the US, but now people will be able to travel, so it will be easier for them. But there's also a hybrid version so that people can tune in. And I know then you will be, like you always do, announce some customer surveys. Not because I know that these surveys are still going on, and you'll be briefed recently, but what are the few things that people can hear from you today, from what you've seen in this past few months, from the usage of your users, millions of users, as they were using the platform for online content, and also now as businesses are reopening?
Yeah, so we see things in the data, and then we also hear things from the research that we do. So on the data, number one booking that we still see is yoga. That seems to be still the number one class that is booked, both in person and virtually. And then HIIT is number two. So we've seen that. We have also seen that businesses, as you mentioned, in certain markets that don't have any restrictions are actually at or above their 2019 levels. which we think is really a tremendous marker, because as a business, we also compare our bookings against 2019 and 2020. And in some markets, we're well ahead of where we were in 2019, but in other markets, we're well behind. Australia, for instance, with their recent shutdowns over the last few months, they were kind of the beacon that everybody was looking at it saying, oh, that's how, we're going to be after COVID. And then they kind of got hit almost a year after the US did. And so we certainly see that, the restrictions and government regulations have a very direct impact on bookings and how people are engaging. Other things that we've seen is that the typical hourly blocking of when classes used to be full is not the same anymore, because I think this new hybrid and work from home environment that we live in, people are taking, different classes. They might take one at 10 o'clock or at 11 o'clock, which would normally be pretty tough to do if you were in the office. But they're, more flexible with how they're thinking about their schedules. Maybe they're starting earlier in the day or finishing later in the day. And that gives them opportunity to do these other classes at different times. We're also seeing what we call kind of snackable workouts, which are 30 minutes. And so it's just kind of, maybe you spend half your lunch doing a workout and half your lunch eating, but these kind of shorter snackable type workouts are things that we're seeing. And then we, one of the things that we saw that was interesting kind of in the earlier part of the pandemic was that as fitness businesses were closed, spas and salons were able to open. And so many more people were going into getting spas and salon treatments. Now, there were capacity limitations, so it wasn't as much of a boom for the industry as we would have liked to see. But we do see that people are spending more money on spa and salon treatments. And I think that some of that goes back to that 7 dimensions of wellness, right? It's like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling mentally, emotionally, and just really wanting to kind of reassess the priority that people are putting on their own wellness. And I think spas and salons are definitely benefiting from that.